everybody. Thank you. So I'm with the Center for Urban Community Services. I passed around our annual report so you can get a sense of what the agency does. We're a nonprofit working with mentally ill and homeless and low-income folks throughout New York City. My role is the director of the Manhattan Outreach Consortium, and this is a consortium that's funded by, here, let's do my little thing here. So it was created in 2007. The CUCS holds the contract with the city, so we provide street outreach to any person that's living on the street in Manhattan, street outreach and housing placement services. We contract with two other agencies, God of Riverside and Breaking Ground. Breaking Ground has been connected with Mr. Mudd and his meeting on Tuesdays, I know. So we work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and the idea is that we're using a harm reduction, housing first methodology, right? And so the idea behind that is that you don't have to be sober, you don't have to be taking medication for your mental health issues to be able to receive services or get into housing. It's a very low threshold program, so the only thing you need to be is street homeless and talking with us, and we're going to work on getting housing for you. We pool our internal resources, so we're able to provide housing, transitional and permanent housing for folks from our own agencies, and therefore use that housing first philosophy to get folks inside without having to sort of jump through a lot of hoops first. So we work with the community. One of the things we do is to answer 311 calls. So you can call into 311 or use the app on your cell phone and report concern about a homeless individual in your neighborhood. And within 1 hour, the team will go out to engage with that person and work with them to get them inside and offer them services. We also work closely with the police precincts and the Parks Department, community boards and churches, neighborhood groups. We are out there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but it's also helpful to have eyes in other city agencies helping us locate folks that are homeless and staying outside. So who are our clients, right? So our clients are folks that are street homeless. They're often service weary, meaning that they are, they may have been in and out of multiple institutions, incarceration, foster care, hospitals, detox, inpatient drug treatment, and the shelter system often, right? And they have had experiences that are negative in the shelter system, and so instead of going to the shelter, they're going to be staying outside on the street. The city provides shelter for anybody. Anybody can come up to an intake shelter for men and women at any time, and the city will provide shelter for them. There's a right to shelter in New York City. As you may know, there's over 60,000 folks that are in shelter right now in New York City, and many more that others that stay on the street. So, as I've mentioned, mentally ill, substance abusing, multiple incarcerations, foster care, also trauma survivors, folks that have experienced trauma early on in their lives, and also the trauma of living out on the street as well. So the goal is to add folks to caseload, engage with them, work with them where they're at. We really, we're going out on the street and finding folks where they're sleeping, and figuring out what they need and how we can assist them. We're trying to determine sort of the best fit for placement. So they may not be interested in going into a city shelter, but we are able to provide other options. Some of those options are called safe havens. They're sort of more of a low threshold. They're smaller. They provide case management, medical and mental health services, and it's more of there's no curfew. You can stay out for up to 72 hours, or sort of a come and go in a way that's different than with a shelter, where if you don't come in by 10 o'clock, you lose your bed. We match folks based on their preference. We also use priority system. If folks have a long time of homeless history, that's going to give them more priority. And also whether they have medical or mental health conditions can also help them get into housing more quickly. And whether they're eligible. These different places are for men. They may be for men and women. They may be for just men or just women. You may need to have a mental health diagnosis to go in. Those are some of the examples of what would make somebody eligible for a program. So other than the safe havens I mentioned, there's also church beds. There's many churches throughout the city that provide shelter to folks overnight in that same sort of low threshold manner. And also we utilize beds at the YMCA. and that's an individual room at the YMCA, which can be very helpful for folks that have had trauma experiences and are concerned about sharing space with people. So the idea once we get someone into once we get someone inside is to be working on permanent housing. So the goal with somebody is always getting them permanently housed, and that can look a couple different ways, but one of the main ways that we get people into housing is through supportive housing. And that's also something that CUCS does and provides throughout the city. And that is basically an apartment that's yours with your own lease, but there are services in the building to help you maintain that apartment and maintain your health and wellness in that apartment. And that's a really great resource for a lot of our folks. It also comes with a subsidy, because as we all know, it's very housing in New York City can be very expensive, and folks need a little bit of help with the rent. So we work on what we call a 2010 packet for the housing. We get benefits, identification, those types of things, and a letter about homeless time. And then once we get someone into permanent housing, we're going to be working with them for about 3 months to make sure that they maintain that housing. But a lot of folks, it's not a linear process, right? I mean, it could be a couple times in and out of safe havens or transitional housing until they find something that works for them, and then working hard to get that housing packet together. But even if the housing packet's together, we still have to find that availability in that place for housing. So we're always advocating to create more supportive housing in the city to provide more opportunity. But also more affordable housing, so that folks that are in supportive housing and may no longer need the support, but really need the subsidy, have somewhere else to go from there and make a apartment available to somebody who's interested in the support, needs the support. In terms of getting someone into transitional and working with us, I mean, the other thing is the eligibility. There's safe havens are set aside for what we term as chronically homeless, so that's having spent 9 months out of the last 2 years on the street. So there's an eligibility requirement there. If you meet that and you're connected to an outreach team, we could, probably within a month, we could get you into one of those, maybe even sooner depending on the availability. The permanent housing is going to take 6 to 8 months to a year. So there are intake shelters. One of them is Bellevue for men down on 30th Street, right? And some folks, the idea of going to Bellevue, they've been there, they've dealt with that, it's a challenge. We are able to offer routes to, there's so many shelters throughout the city that we are able to offer routes directly into those shelters as opposed to having to go through Bellevue. So that's one other option we provide. Also, the church beds that I mentioned are available for everybody. So we try to find the right fit. We need more of the housing. I mean, I think we need more of the safe havens, we need more of the permanent housing, we need more of all of it. I mean, thinking about subsidies, the process to get a subsidy, even when someone gets connected to, is lucky enough to get connected to the permanent housing. I'm thinking of a woman that was connected back in February, and still going through the process of getting approved for the subsidy for the housing. So all that takes a lot of time too. I think there is a focus here in New York City of building housing for folks that can spend a lot of money on that housing, and that's something that we need to change. We do find that a lot of folks that have been out for a long time are New Yorkers and were born and raised here. And then there's another group that is more transient. Thank you. Okay.